The myth about sailors is not a myth.
At least from your experience.
Well, yeah.
Hey!
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first episode of TransHampton. It's a podcast by Trans Pride Southampton. We're currently recording this through Discord and everything, and it's really stupid to be able to actually do. We've been trying to set up for the past half an hour or so. I'm one of your hosts, Sam, she, her pronouns. If we go through with Aoife first.
Hello, I am Aoife. I use she, they pronouns.
Hi, my name's Mabel. I use she, her pronouns.
I am Orla, and I use she, her pronouns.
So yeah, we've got a lot of she, her pronouns in this podcast and everything. But we're going to be going through several different topics. We have asked you for some topics on our Trans Pride Southampton Facebook and Instagram. We will probably be asking for more further information later down the line when it comes to what you want to be able to listen to and everything. So you can always go check us out on them. It'll be in the show notes. I've actually written up most of the show notes, at least basis of the show notes and everything, so it's a lot easier on whatever platform you're on. It's rather a description or show notes when it comes to it. So let's start off with the first topic. So the UK election and our predictions of what is going on with it. So let's just sort of go around and see what we think about the election and everything, especially with the current Tory government inside of it. It's reasonably political, so if you want to move across to a further point in the episode, I will try and put the chapters and everything so you can always skip ahead.
It kind of looks like it's going to be a flat-out win for Labour. I mean, what are they? Mabel, you'll know this better than I do. They're about, 20 points ahead in the opinion polls?
They do have a clear win right now, and you can hear it a lot in various tabloids there where there's Conservative ministers trying to say that they should swap leader again. So trying to ask if maybe swapping from Rishi Sunak, they'll have their new messiah of a leader to be able to keep themselves in the seat there as Prime Minister, but I just don't see it happening personally.
No, I can't see it happening really because they're so behind in the opinion polls, and all the polls that are coming out are talking about a Tory wipeout. I would be surprised if they wound up in like third place, came in behind the Lib Dems. I'd be surprised at that.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't got a clue how it's going to go. I could totally see the inverse happening and just people still voting Tory because they can't think to do anything better. That's all they know. It's all they're good for, perhaps. So they just keep doing it. I wouldn't want to say either way. But it's the thing of a lot of people look at it as it's a lesser of two evils, but there's not much difference between either side.
See, I think it's the case of more people from the Tory party will definitely move across and hopefully vote for Labour and everything, especially knowing that they've turned around and threatened like bigger dogs and things with the XL bully ban, as well as
that's been very unpopular.
That's been very unpopular, even with people that, of course, don't support trans rights and all that. The only problem that we do have is obviously the other side of things is Labour's turned around lately and stated that they're pretty much not doing anything for trans rights or anything. They're turning around and not really doing anything major, and they're not planning on adding anything to their their manifesto even further. If anything, they've taken away a lot of stuff, haven't they?
Yeah, I think the best we can hope for is for the next 4 to 5 years they will leave us alone.
And that's probably the best case scenario at the moment. Is we're left alone and we're not being like this ban. In the end of the day, the past year or so,
culture wars.
It is cultural wars, but it's also the case of we've turned around and had so much hatred towards us, not only from just random people that are cis and don't understand it, but also from even other trans people and stuff. We have shit thrown at us and all the time, not always figurative, not always figuratively and all that, but it is the case of like there is a lot of stuff that a ban here, ban there, and everything that's going on. It's hard to keep up what's going on in the UK when it comes to what we're banned from next, especially all the sports and things that we've been banned on through the past year or so. The one sport I think we can actually do with the same policy as what they done many years ago for the Olympics and stuff is like shooting. I think we worked out, wasn't it, Mabel?
I think so, yeah, for low level competitions, but we pretty much just can't compete in the Olympics at this stage, which is a real shame. Not with the government necessarily, but it's a real shame to see that happen with trans people and sort of like British cycling and stuff like that too, which have had similarly bad rules at the moment.
They did it with angling as well, didn't they?
Yeah, angler fishing.
Yeah,
And chess.
and chess.
And chess. Yeah.
If we talked about every single ban that we had for the past year or something through sports, we're going to be here all day, obviously. But it is the case of, it sucks that we're banned from sports and where a lot of the thing is they've put it down to, we want to be in certain bathrooms and we want to obviously be in sports. I've never been really interested in sports. Maybe I'll do a sport here and there. I've done table tennis in the past. I've done rifle shooting in the past and all that, what you can do in the UK and things. But it is the case of like, it's not something that I've really wanted to do or get into professionally or anything like that. I don't think most of us or even any of us are really interested in sports. We're interested in keeping ourselves exercised, but that's about it. And it's hard to do that, of course, out and about if people are not liking you and things.
Yeah, I had a bad time in when I went to a gym in Southampton. The cis girls made it quite clear they didn't want me in their changing room.
Yeah.
So I've never been to a gym since.
And that's one of the things that we hope to be doing, at least with ourselves, and maybe even pushing outwards, because, well, we're the main 4 people for Trans Pride Southampton. We would like to be able to turn around and make it a safe space, even if it's once a week or once a month or whatever it is, for us to be able to, of course, go and go swim or go like use the gym and things like that. It's something that we
did talk about that, didn't we? Having a gym day.
We
Yeah.
have, and
the 4 of us.
Yeah, we talked about it further a little bit today and everything, because I went over Orla's and things to be able to sort it out so that she can come join the podcast and everything.
Thank you, Sam.
So yeah, it's something that we would like to do, and it's definitely something that is needed more, especially across the UK and across America or anywhere else. Is definitely, we need more possibilities for like trans people and non-binary people and things to be able to turn around and feel and have safe spaces and things. And it's definitely, hopefully, going to happen.
I think the thing we don't really realise, that we don't pay much attention to, is the fact that I don't think in the last few years the anti-trans legislation has not really been led by governments as such. Because you remember Theresa May was going to reintroduce the Gender Recognition Act and make it so we could all self-ID. So it's not been pushed by governments. It's really pushed by the media, the newspapers, BBC, pressure groups that associate with those particular newspapers. And so they set the agenda for the government. They tell the government what legislation they should push through. And then the Tories act accordingly. And I think until we do something about the media in this country, which is so toxic and predominantly right wing, I don't think we're going to get much hope of any real significant change unless a government came out and said, no, enough of this nonsense. We're not going to pay attention to it. We're just going to go ahead with trans rights. I don't, unless something happens in the media landscape, I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon.
Yeah, unless there's a predominantly, like, you can't deny it's bad for trans people, or like it is the case of like trans people are lovely or whatever, like unless it's a really pro-trans thing in the media that you can't swing any other way, and people rather see that they have like their own agenda when it comes to the whole like media landscape and everything. I don't think people will be moving away from at least mainstream media, at least the older generation and things like that. A lot of younger generation like me, I sit there through TikTok and I watch people talk about these bits of news and all that, and they'll even link sometimes to the original articles and all that throughout other media and all that, and they'll even explain like this is not good for these sorts of people or anything like that, and that's really helpful for at least me and all that, and that's where I get a lot of my news.
Well, I think I think a name that a lot of us might recognise is Lucy Meadows. she was a teacher who came out as trans very, very quietly. There, it was just in a school newsletter over Christmas that she'd be coming back as a different name and Miss rather than a Mister teacher, of course, there. So, but following that very small newsletter there, some people just picked up on it, and the press especially, they really, really singled her out. I was just looking it up online quickly to remind myself, but the coroner's inquest from the death does criticise the press for their handling of the story. According to the Guardian, he said that she was singled out by the Daily Mail as he accused the paper of ridicule and humiliation. So that was the coroner against what happened to Lucy Meadows. I think they were going to the school and asking for parents' opinions and just trying to really make them say something that they could twist into some negative way. Yeah, the news have always been our worst enemy in the UK. You'll hear about, I think, Christine Georgianison. I think she was outed by the press, as was April Ashley, if that's right too. I think she was outed as well. Since trans people really, in the modern day, the press has just really been out for blood whenever they've seen us.
I think that comes down to simply controversy sells. In the end of the day, you're going to turn around and read an article or watch something if it's the case of it's controversial. And that's where like media has got to, especially the news and stuff. So many times through the past like 5-10 years, it seems to be getting more and more not only controversial, but also the case of like you're trying to drive up attention to all of these different things, especially across like social media and stuff. It's getting to a toxic environment. It's becoming not only like Twitter or now known as X or anything, being a toxic cesspool of everything, but it's being leaked out to the rest of the internet and leaked out to even social media and stuff. It's definitely not helpful for the longevity of hopefully people online feeling comfortable, or they're feeling more comfortable to the point that they're hating each other at the current moment. That's what it is more than anything. And it's also not helpful for, of course, the next generation of people, because in the end of the day, we're not going to be the last generation, or I hope we're not the last generation. We're going to have the next generation of trans people. We're going to have the next generation of gay people. We're going to have the next generation of straight people. It doesn't really matter in the end of the day. So it is the case of we have to worry about that. And that's what we're trying to do with Trans Pride, is not only turn around and fight for our own rights, but also the next generations.
Looking out for the younger people too. There was one good thing I saw today when I went to the library to get my library card sorted. Was when I went there, I saw a Beyond Reflections poster, and that was up just in the signage area for self-help in the library, and none of that was around when I was young, so hopefully that is helping the younger generation there. Of course, if you've not heard of Beyond Reflections before, they're a transgender charity who do a lot of good work locally.
Okay, so that's enough for this section, obviously. One of the major things that I want to put into this section of talking about the UK elections and, of course, the political climate at the current moment. What is our predictions at the current moment with the whole election and all that? What we've obviously said that we wanted the whole thing to be, of course, a little bit more left-wing than Tories and things. But it is the case of when do we think this election will be? Because one of the major things is they get till like, was it January next year to be able to do this? So we got
January 25th.
January 25th.
I think it's going to be autumn. They said the election's going to happen though.
I think it'll be November.
Yeah, I think the predictions so far is like October, November for most people, at least from what I've heard. It'd
be November.
Yeah, it's obviously going to be... The thing is, you don't want to go too cold, because that's when all the Tory people who would go and vote for Tory will just go, you know what, it's too cold, I can't be bothered to go out. So it's technically to our advantage if they do it later on in the year when it's colder, because I'm sure plenty of trans people, plenty of people that are dog owners that don't want to deal with the XL bully ban, and plenty of other people that have been screwed over by the Tories in the recent year or so are going to be out there and happy to be able to line up and get their voice in. So, yeah.
I think the Tory vote's going to stay at home, or it's going to vote reform. But I don't think that many Tories will vote reform. I think they'll stay at home.
Yeah. Aoife?
I mean, again, it could go either way for me. I wouldn't want to put my eggs in one basket either side. It could be a case that either Tories don't show up, they vote for a non-mainstream party instead of Labour, who knows? Or they could just say, oh, well, Starmer's better than the cavalcade of Tory Prime Ministers we've had, so we'll go for Labour. I don't know, to be honest.
So yeah, that's basically what we think about the current elections and everything, as well as a few extra topics of like what the political stance and everything with trans rights and things are at the current moment. We'll move on to the next topic, what is the current state of education, what we think of it. I think I'm the youngest one here. I've just turned 22 today, so it is the case of it's been a couple of years since I've been in education. I did go back at one point, but yeah. What does everyone think about the current state of education, especially towards trans rights and non-binary people and things like that? What have you heard about everything? What's going on?
Well, I read the Pink News article. I've read some of the Pink News article, and I've seen a number of videos on social media, predominantly on YouTube, and it's just, I think my takeaway from the educational advice they gave the schools is they just want us in the closet. They want us to go through school not being out. It's like Section 28 when I was at school. You can't really talk about it. It's an excuse for teachers to bully you. So why would you want to come out if a teacher's just going to use the wrong pronouns and dead name you all the time? It is just a way of keeping the youth in the closet and hoping, like Section 28 did to some degree, it will keep them from coming out and transitioning at least until they're... Well, I didn't until I was 28. So that's what Section 28 did to me. It was not pleasant.
I think that brings it on to like, as well, if you had Section 28, but it was the case of you couldn't even have education of it or learn about it, or could you?
No.
Obviously, I didn't grow up in your generation or anything, but it is the case of it would suck even more if they did have a similar thing to what like America's trying to do of a don't say gay bill, where you're not allowed to actually turn around and talk about gay people or trans people, non-binary people and stuff like that, and explore those areas, because it would be good to explore those areas and see where we can get to when it comes to learning about like different like people exploring their gender and different people being able to be themselves. I believe they're trying to force. They did put in something lately, what they done not as a law, because they weren't allowed to do it as a law because of I guess it's affecting human rights or whatever. But it was the case of they tried to put in like restrictions for trans students, as well as like we suggest that you tell the parents and all these other things.
So what they did was they released some guidance about how to deal with transgender pupils, and it was pretty much that they completely ignore any risk of outing a trans child that there could be, of course, and just say, right, we have to get the parents involved. If people comes out to you, the guidance was to say that you need to out them to their parents, and just see how that does take matters there. You would need to seek a parent's approval before you could respect a nickname, a change of name, or a request to use different pronouns, which in my opinion is just basic respect. If someone asks you to use a different name or pronouns, you don't need to worry about permission. You don't need to worry about a big thumbs up before you go ahead and do it. If someone's asked you something, just do it. Just be nice. But that's what the guidance is. As you said, Sam, it's not a law, of course. So hopefully there's going to be a lot of pro-trans teachers that won't be following that guidance there, because it's not very good guidance. But yeah, it's really negative to see that from the government there.
Yeah,
yeah, it's just a way to keep us in the closet.
Yeah, it's a way to keep us in the closet, discriminates us. It's also the case of like it'll just be pushed further towards like gay students and stuff like that. You'd have to out your gay students towards their family and stuff like that. There's plenty of gay people that I knew whilst I was growing up in school and stuff like that. And to be honest, it doesn't really matter in the end of the day, unless you're planning on being with them, and most people aren't. It's the case of like you don't really need to know. When it comes to trans people, it's a little bit different, obviously, because it is the case of like you're starting to grow out your hair and use your pronouns and dress the way that you enjoy and all that. And those are all gender affirming care things. It's one of the things that they're also trying to remove lately is stop gender affirming care in schools. So if you have long hair, they got to out you to your parents, and that sucks if it is the case. And if a lot of teachers turn around and do it, it's going to harm a lot of young trans people, as well as possibly putting them in danger. Because I've luckily had a very supportive family, and I didn't come out when I was younger anyway. But it was the case of, I'm sure if I did come out when I was younger, I'd have been supported all through my school stuff and everything, and they would have done everything, because they still support me to this day. I doubt all of you have turned around and had very similar sort of situations where it's all been okay and your family has loved you, and no matter what sort of thing.
I came out as trans when I was in school, but I wasn't supported by my parents. Now, and I do appreciate the way that it was handled a bit more in my school, though, compared to the current guidance. I did come out to teachers and to other students first, just by changing my appearance, the way that I dressed, for example, and I requested a different use of pronouns, but I wasn't made to. Well, I wasn't outed. I didn't hear that my parents knew the next day. I was told from my head teacher that I did have to come out to my parents for safeguarding reasons, but they didn't try to do it for me. And when I did have to do that, they didn't. There wasn't anything negative from that. They just let me to take my own time, and they wanted to speak to me after I did it just to make sure everything was okay. And yeah, compared to the current guidance, it's just not good at all. Really, we all deserve better.
Yeah, I will add this to what Mabel said, hoping that people won't necessarily pay attention to it and teachers won't. As we all know, I don't know if the audience knows, but they brought in new guidance for trans women, predominantly trans women in hospital, where they were suggesting that they wanted trans women to be put onto male wards. As you girls know, as you girls know, I've been in hospital a couple of times over the last 3 months, and on both occasions, they were really good with me. And when I was being wheeled out of majors to go up to the ward, I said to the nurse, "Oh, are you putting me on a male ward?" And he turned around and said, "No, you're a trans woman. We don't care what the government says. You're going on a female ward." So there's a lot of people not paying attention to the guidance.
It's good knowing that people are paying attention to the guidance, but also then turning around and going against it, because it definitely favors a lot more towards trans people and things like that. Especially as, like, we don't want to be the only ones that are turning around and saying, like, hey, like, stand with us and all this other stuff. But when, like, cis people who of course not trans and everything, and maybe haven't had to question their gender and all that, if they do turn around and do question us, obviously it is the case of we need to be able to understand what we're even saying. But it is also the case of turn around and realize, hey, by the way, like, that's understandable what you're saying, and like, sort of at least listen to us, because in the end of the day, all we ask is for people to be able to listen and hear about us and start trying to learn about us, instead of turning around and just taking whatever random person who does not know anything about trans people, maybe haven't even encountered a trans person in their life, turn around and saying, this is what trans people are like, this is what they do, and ignore all of the other trans, like, call outs and things like that. Just go with this one thing. And it's helpful to, of course, like, learn about trans people from trans people and people that interact with trans people, obviously.
I think the problem we have is, as a trans person, on the whole, unless you have money, if you don't have much money, we're very much beholden to the state. We receive our money from the government. We receive our healthcare from the government. We receive our access for particularly to things like HRT. So when you have a government that is putting pressure on you and denying you services and limiting you to what you can do, it's very difficult to break out of that circle, because a lot of us are very reliant on the state to be able to transition in the first place.
So this actually moves on to the last topic that I was going to talk about, what was the closure of trans clinics in London and pretty much everywhere. There seems to be a decent portion of private clinics, especially, that are being closed. What sucks, obviously, like you were mentioning, We need these clinics to be open. If we do have money, we can then go to those clinics and get surgeries such as facial feminization surgery, as well as being able to get bottom surgery or chest surgery or anything like that. It's the case that we can, of course, go to them and get all of that, or we can even can we go there for hormones or anything?
Yeah, I think so. In some private clinics, you can.
So obviously, because of all these closures and things, we rather have to go abroad to be able to, of course, do it. Well, it costs even more sometimes to be able to, of course, get the plane tickets and stuff. Sometimes it's not, but it's also the case of we're risking ourselves by going abroad, and we're not covered by most things, especially when it is a major surgery. Because don't get me wrong, it is a major surgery if you're getting any of these surgeries. It is life-changing and things like that. But for trans people, it's life-changing for the better, obviously. It's a lot of us need these sorts of surgeries, and or at least have the opportunity to have these surgeries to be able to feel like we're able to carry on in life, and it's definitely very helpful. I think most of us do purchase our HRT and everything from abroad and stuff, and if we didn't have that option, we wouldn't be as far as we are at the current moment. What would suck, obviously.
So I'm lucky because I've gone through the NHS process. But the first time, as you girls know, when I transitioned, I went private. I managed to get my GP at the time to turn the private prescription into an NHS prescription. But you could only do that for so long until the NHS were like, you have to stop that. And also the psychiatrist I saw in London, for some of the older girls listening to this, Dr. Russell Reed, Uncle Russell, he was in the end forced out by the NHS because they didn't like his private practice. And when I think his name is Richard Curtis, the guy who took over from him, he's being restricted in what he can do.
Yeah, it's the thing. If they're being restricted, of course you want to be able to, of course, have safe surgeries and things like that, and it does make sense. But it's also the case of it sucks when they're being restricted so much they can't even treat trans people and things like that anymore. It's the case of you're hindering the possibility of a lot of trans people being able to transition and have these surgeries that have been proven to be safe in other countries and things, especially even doing it so cheaply in other countries. Like, Mabel would probably know a lot more than me because I don't look into it too much because I'm not looking into a bottom surgery or anything. But Mabel has looked into it previously, and I'm sure you lot have looked into it a lot more than me when it comes to surgeries and prices and things like that.
I think it's really bad that there is a transgender clinic closing down. Of course, it's sad all the time when a service goes that you need. But let's face it, there's not that many transgender clinics, so it really is bad to hear about that shutdown. And it's a shame, of course, that there's not more NHS sites either in the UK. I think for people in Northern Ireland, there basically just isn't support, any support whatsoever there, and their best chance really is from travelling down from Northern Ireland to London to be able to access any treatment, and that's if they were to go with a gender identity clinic. But yeah, for this transgender, sorry,
go on, Mabel.
It's okay, but overall, I just think it's bad for this transgender clinic in London to be closing down.
I think Mabel's right what she says. I don't think there is one in Northern Ireland, and I don't think there's one in the Principality in Wales either.
I know there's one being really opened up in Scotland.
Yeah,
they've recently had one open up. What's really good, but it means that we're traveling from all the way down Southampton all the way up to Scotland. That takes like, what's that, over a day to be able to actually get up there if we've done a car journey. I don't think any of us drive, so it would be the case of it'll be trains after trains just to be able to try and get up all the way to Scotland to be able to, of course, go and get an appointment or anything. It's like the Southampton General Hospital denied service to me and all that. I only want hormones from the NHS. If I can ever find an actual doctor that will turn around and prescribe me them, then that would be great. And I'm going to have to go all the way to Bournemouth at like 9 a.m. when I do actually have my official appointment in a couple of months' time. But they delayed it already by like 5 months. When I was supposed to have it back in December. And it sucks that they keep on doing that. They keep on just delaying and delaying and delaying. And it's why it's going to take so long for most people. I'm very lucky, and when I was on call with them talking about what I wanted and everything, I did mention that I'm not looking for surgery. I'm not looking for anything else. I'm just looking for hormones at the current moment, and that's what I will want for 2-3 years till I turn around and decide if I want anything else. But it's the case of it's what it is. It just sucks that more and more like doctors and like places you can actually go for with the clinics and things are closing down, because it would be helpful to have more, especially spread across the UK, even if they're smaller, because in the end of the day, trans people are not just in London, trans people are not just in Scotland, trans people are everywhere, including in these countries that, of course, being discriminated upon and all these other things. It just sucks that the UK and the US seem to be going backwards more than anything when it comes to trans healthcare and trans support and things like that.
Am I right in saying that the idea was to close the Tavistock Clinic in London and make it more regionally based?
I think that is supposed to be for kids.
Is that just for kids?
I think so, yeah, because they were closing down the centre. I'm just reading the BBC article about it now, actually, back in 2022, when the Tavistock Kids Clinic did close down, and they were going to have one in northwest of England, I think, yeah, so about Manchester way-ish, and then there was going to be another one reopening in London, but I'm not too sure why Kids did close down in the end. I think it was a few different reasons. I don't know if either of you have heard more about that.
It would make sense to make it more regionally based. I mean, just having a clinic in somewhere like Brighton would be so much easier than making us go all the way to London.
Yeah, especially as it would be cheaper for us to be able to get there, obviously, because, well, we went to London Trans Pride last year and for their 10th year anniversary and things, and that was amazing.
It was Brighton, not London.
Oh, Brighton. Did I say London?
Yeah.
So we went to Brighton Trans Pride last year, and instead of spending like £80+ to be able to do like basically a 2-way trip to London, it was the case of what was it, like £30 less than that for like we were staying over for like two or so days, me and Mabel, and we stayed for pretty much the whole thing, and it was pretty good. But it was also the case of like it was reasonably cheap, what was even better. And knowing that they have a huge queer audience and things like that, with like just gay people and lesbians and everything under the umbrella of LGBTQIA plus, it is the case of it would make sense for like a trans clinic to open up over there and start supplying people with help and stuff. It would be really good.
I think the problem we have is the government's just not spending any money. So you've got mental health services, no money, crumbling service. Trans healthcare, not that brilliant. Not that many people want to do it. Not that much funding. Sexual health clinics, oversubscribed. Not that many. Closing them down. It all runs into each other. And when you have a government that restricts services, shuts things down and sells them off, you lose access to things. You know what I mean? I think you're right. It would be good to have somewhere in Brighton or even in Southampton. Me and Mabel have discussed this. 10% of the population, over 10% of the population of Southampton identifies on the queer spectrum somewhere. So it would make sense to have those sorts of facilities in the city for a large audience.
That's the thing. We're very lucky to have so many queer organizations in like Southampton, but none of us are like doctors or anything like that, obviously. So it's not like we can start our own clinic or do anything like that. It's the case of we started Trans Pride Southampton, originally part of People's Pride Southampton, and we spanned off because of creative differences and wanted to focus on the trans community a lot more. And then we now connect with like Southampton Pride through you, Ola. And then it's the case of like we also have like other connections with like Current Art House, or is changing and adapting.
There's People's Pride too. Yeah, there's loads of different organisations in Southampton. It really shows how queer we are as a city.
And that's the thing, it's being called out for because people are accepting any sort of help or anything that comes in. We've ended up collecting so many followers from Facebook and Instagram and all that, and still have people talk to us pretty much daily at this point. And we don't even post daily to turn around and ask for help or like want advice or anything. And obviously we're not always the best people to be able to handle advice, but it's also the case of we can only speak from our own experiences. And to be honest, with 4 different people or even being able to talk to the rest of the community and everything. It's very helpful because we can collect hundreds of people's experiences of what they've done through the past and all that. And the lucky thing is we're also in contact with all the other trans prides in the UK, because there's like a trans pride collective of people and things. What's great, and they're roughly based London, but it's the case of it's all over the UK what we can talk to just on a WhatsApp that we can just send off and see how it's doing and everything, and we can ask for advice and stuff. So it's definitely helpful, but we need a lot more things for trans people. We need a lot more thing for queer people in general, especially as you were saying, Orla, 10% of the population. That's not a small amount. Of course, there's like less than 0.1%, or it's like less than 1% of them are going to be trans, or at least in the population in general is going to be trans. So it is a lot less for our audience when it comes to trans people and stuff. But it is the case of we're still part of the LGBT community. You can't help that. And it's definitely good when LGBT people support trans rights and fight for trans rights alongside us, because it's the only way that we're going to win, and it's the only way that we're all going to stay together and be the whole big LGBTQIA plus society. And that's what we need.
I think, Sam, you might be underestimating it in the sense of the trans population in Southampton and non-binary.
Because the census showed it was a bit higher, wasn't it?
I think, I mean, just on anecdotal experience, I shouldn't say this, people are getting into trouble, but when I go out in town, on a visit into town, maybe going to the bank or to the shops, 9 times out of 10, I will see at least what I clock as 2 trans girls wandering around the city. In fact, there's one that I've noticed who I see her quite a bit, and we've got to the point now where we say hello to each other, because there does seem to be a very... I mean, when we had Trans Pride last year, how many was there? It was about 300 of us.
400, I think I clocked.
Yeah, and most of them were from the city.
Yeah, and that's the thing. We heard a lot of people from the city. It seems to be that we got like regular people and stuff, and sometimes it was the case of like some trans people were in town and they just joined along, and it's like, oh, Trans Pride today. Okay, we'll come along. That's fine. We'll go do this for a couple of hours. It was great when we're doing our Pride March and stuff like that. I think we need. We're saying about a big banner this year so that we can actually show it off, because I got questions so many times whilst we're going through the march and everything. What's this marching for?
What are we?
Yeah, even though that we're screaming and shouting like trans rights and all this other stuff, it's the case of a lot of people were asking why. It's like, oh, it's for trans rights and all that, and some of them were like, okay, and others were like, ugh. And it's like, okay, that's like we're marching through. In the end of the day, we're getting through. We'll be out of your hair in 2 seconds, sort of thing. It doesn't really matter. It's the same as like we're in your life. We don't really care who you are. If it's the case of you're turning around and being like annoying to us and all that, we're going to turn around to call it out. But if you're turning around and going, hey, you're just a person in the end of the day, we're going to want to talk to you more. In the case of anything, you're going to want more of the good things than the bad things.
I just looked it up actually from the census back in 2021. So in Southampton, 1,633 people. So that's 0.8% aged 16 and over identifies themselves as a different sex from that registered at birth. And then it goes on to say, just on the census data I'm looking at my phone, 0.15% of people were trans women, and that's the highest ranking amongst other comparators, which is about 0.10% in the rest of England. And then it's about the same figure for trans men, again 0.15%. And then there is 0.19% with other gender identities, so say non-binary, gender fluid, gender queer, all of that jazz. So yeah, there is a lot of queer people, especially with gender-related queerness in Southampton. Trans Pride's a long time running, really.
Does that also include intersex as well?
No, I don't think that would be, because that's not really sex registered at birth, where that was 0.80%.
Okay.
I don't even think it was on the census either. I think, if I remember rightly, on the census, they asked you specifically if you identified as trans.
Yeah. And that's the thing, like not everyone is going to identify as trans, even if you're non-binary and stuff. It's the case of you don't always identify as trans, because even though trans is an umbrella term, not all non-binary people, not all intersex people, or who don't sort of go by their like gender by birth or whatever, is the case of they're going to turn around and go, yeah, I'm under the trans umbrella and everything, even though they technically do count as it being like gender fluid and things like that. Some people are like, it's just a thing I feel occasionally or whatever, and just put like I'm straight and like I'm male and all this other stuff or whatever. And they just turn around and tick those boxes just so that they get it out, because I'm pretty sure we had to do that as well. It wasn't a case of like it was a, hey, if you want to do it, you can do it. It was a, hey, do this.
You had
Otherwise,
to do the census.
yeah, otherwise you would have had a legal issue in a way. Some people might have, of course,
It's a fine, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, it's a fine.
misdone it, because in the end of the day, they're technically tracking how many of us there are. Well, if we done it ourselves, if we turned around and went, hey, by the way, any gender questioning or like gender queer people in general, like trans people, non-binary people, and all that, if you turn around and just tell us that you are and just tick this box and all that, we could technically get a rough number, obviously. And I guess the census would give us a better number because it's everyone, but it is also the case of like there is going to be a lot of
The
people.
census has a much greater span.
It's going to be a lot of people that will be very scared of actually ticking that one box, because it is the case of they're going to be sort of out of the government in a way. You're turning around and putting it down on a piece of paper that, hey,
It's
by
the
way, you
first time they talked about gender and sexuality this time, though, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was.
So it's very eagerly awaited, those results. Yeah. Wasn't there something to do with the government about them? Were they not too sure about the numbers?
The government asked them to go away and reassess it because they did not trust their numbers, and the census people came out and said these are correct. We do trust our numbers. We're not worried going over it.
Yeah. Never know. In the future, we'll probably have another census, and it will probably change a lot, especially as
next one's next year, isn't it?
No, it's every 10 years.
So every 10 years. So that's 2031. It'll be.
Yeah.
If it's 2021, it was done. Or maybe, to be honest, it might have been pushed back by a year. Might it? Because of 20.
It might have been because of COVID, but I can't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah.
I'm sure if I remember rightly, the census year always falls on the one digit in the decade.
Okay, so it would make sense. 2031 would be the next one, obviously, then. And the thing is, wasn't there like a decent portion of people that came out just after 2020, of course, the pandemic and everything? And of course, that broke a lot of people's minds and things, not always for the better, but it was the case of like it made mental health be more of an issue. What is, of course, the NHS is struggling now a lot more than it was like 5 or so years ago. Well, yeah, it would have been 5 years ago. So it's the case of like they're struggling a lot more than usual, even though they were struggling originally. And it's also the case of a lot of like trans and non-binary people and things sort of came out after that point. Obviously, like mine and Mabel's generation might have realized when they were becoming adults, sort of thing. But it's also the case of like a lot of people sort of realized, especially due to at least from what I've noticed, is a lot of people watch like Bo Burnham's Inside and realize they're not comfortable in their skin.
So Max from Beyond Reflection was talking to me at Pride, Southampton Pride last year when we were doing the stall, and he said, yeah, what's happened is a lot of people have spent lockdown sitting at home reassessing their lives and have come out as trans and have realised what they've already known. It's just that lockdown gave them the time to go through everything in their head, fresh from distraction. And he said there are so many people coming to us now asking for advice and guidance. So yeah, I think lockdown did do it for a lot of people as well.
It was a time that, like, for the first time in a long time, some people might have been not working or not in school or not doing anything for quite a few months, and that's probably what done it more than anything. Give me a second. I'm just gonna.
Just gave people a break.
Yeah, it just gave people a break, and it allowed people to be able to mess around and do things that they might want to do. It's like a lot of YouTubers and things, or TikTokers. Like a lot of people were using TikTok at the time, in a way. It is the case of a lot of people have been able to discover themselves a lot more, and rather make a career out of it, where they've turned around and went, oh, I really like creating videos and podcasts and all these other things. In a way, there's so many podcasts that come up on my For You page occasionally. I just scroll through all of it, and it's like some of it I don't like, some of it I might listen to later and everything. But it is the case of like a lot of people have been able to not only make careers from like everything, but it's also the case of they have questioned themselves so many times. I was questioning throughout the whole thing of if I was gender fluid originally, and I came out as gender fluid shortly after the pandemic was over, and I was moved out and everything, and I just explored that for a little bit, and then eventually I came out as trans and went, hey, look, I'm trans and everything, and I knew that I've been questioning for many, many years, but it was the case of obviously in my mind, I was trying to block it and trying to stop myself from realizing or researching or doing any of these things that I should have done a long time ago.
Yeah, no, so it was really a big chance for people to be able to assess themselves. It's funny, I've not done as much baking, I've not made as many cakes or brownies since the first lockdown in 2020, because the only chance I'd get to go outside would be to go and get the ingredients, and then I just needed something to do for a few hours. So I think a lot of people did have more chances to assess themselves and express themselves as well there. But in other ways too, it doesn't really surprise me that Southampton does have such a queer community. We've got a really rich local queer history, and all of that might be something you know a wee bit about too. For LGBT History Month. Next month in February, I've set up a lot of posts that are about local queer history. So it's like how the Beaumont Society was formed in Southampton, about Solent Switchboard, because that got callers from like all the way down to the Channel Islands up to Andover. So that was a really big support network for a helpline for queer people. And then there was Solent Pride back in 1991 and 92, and that was a 2-week Pride event. Imagine what you could get done in 2 weeks. Yeah, so we really have had a really big queer history there. So it's no surprise that we're still so queer now.
It's because we're a port city. Port cities traditionally are quite queer. I mean, all you got to do is look through the court records from Portsmouth and Southampton. The amount of men who are getting done for importuning, cottaging and stuff like that. It's nuts. It's nuts. The myth about sailors is not a myth.
At least from your experience.
Well, yeah.
Hey!
No, it's not a myth. Churchill said it: rum, sodomy, and the lash. It's very much when you got men cooped up on a ship for days at a time.
I think this sort of circles us back around. It's kind of weird that knowing that like Rishi Sunak, who's of course our current prime minister and of course unelected and things, is so against at least like trans people and stuff like that, and seems to be at least so against like queer things in general. It seems very strange because he comes from Southampton in a way, and we at this point we don't want to really claim him because it is the case of like he's nothing like most of the people around here, and it is the case of like he seems to have somehow fallen down a path that is so anti-trans, anti-everything, and it kind of sucks because it would have been cool to have
private education. That's what does it.
I don't know if he's trying to. He might just be trying to pander to a certain part of the electorate and the base of the Tory party that he has to appeal to. Remember, he's a leader the party didn't want.
Yeah.
The membership of the party didn't want him. It was the MPs that wanted him. He's not popular with his base, predominantly because he was seen to stab Boris Johnson in the back, and he's British Asian. And there are a lot of Conservative members who are pretty racist.
Yeah, and that's the thing. They seem to be doing a lot of, at least basic, in like, at least looking at it, very racist positions into trying to get people out of the country and trying to do all these things to be able to stop people from being able to come and work in the country, especially for the NHS and stuff like that. They set their price lately at, what was it, like 28,000 or something, or 26,000 they ended up.
Yeah, no, it's 28,000.
Yeah, so they were saying
supposed to be like 32,000, but they slowly lowered it. But
that's
they got told they
it's
couldn't
ridiculous.
do it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's still over our average, like basic wage for most people. So it is the case of you're going to have to be in a really good job and guaranteed that money straight away before you can even move here. And they even made it so that you can't even
And
move
you
your
can't
family.
bring your family in either.
Yeah,
no.
you can't move your family. What means that you're basically sending the money from here back to your family so that they can live and stuff again. So it definitely sucks what they're doing, and I hope it definitely changes with the next election and things. It'll be actually one of the first times that I'm actually voting, because I have to sort out ID and all this other stuff to be able to, of course, do it. And I didn't have ID for so many years, and you have to go online and do all these other things. And they really screwed it up because you had to do all the ID stuff and everything. But it was a Tory
I think
policy,
it
wasn't it?
scared a lot of people with the. It was definitely a Tory policy because it was like last year it was first implemented. I think they have scared a lot of people off, at least with the councillor election last year. But it is actually surprisingly quite easy to get a voters' authority certificate, because I managed to do it last year for my own one. So that's it's a free certificate you can get by contacting the electoral register with your appropriate photograph and just your address and name, date of birth, and then you take that down, because it's all printed off on a piece of paper, to the what's it called when you register where you vote somewhere? Polling
Electoral
station.
office, registry office. Oh, polling station.
So, polling station. Yeah, you go to the electoral register or office to get the form or certificate, and then you take that to the polling station to be able to vote. So it's definitely easy, but they've scared a few people off, I think.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's not easy to always purchase ID. It can be expensive, especially if you need to change name and things, being trans and stuff. I technically have ID, but it's in my dead name, which means I can't actually use it because I was supposed to turn around and change my IDs and do all these things. Because when you do a depol, you're supposed to like turn around and go, I'm never going to use this name again. I'm also get rid of my prefix and things of Mr. to use Miss and all this other stuff and all that. It's almost like a threatening letter saying, no, you can't do that. Was kind of nice in some ways, because of course it does mean that you can turn around and claim like, look, I don't go by that name anymore. Legally, I've signed this document that turns around and says I'm not allowed to use that name anymore. So don't use
It's easier than changing your name in America.
Yeah.
You've got to get a judge to approve it in America.
God, that would be a hassle, especially trying to pay for the fees for that, but also turn
Yeah,
around
it's
and
expensive
get
too.
a court date. That would be insane to be able to do. Think about how much you have to wait for a GP at the current moment for non-trans related things, let alone like trying to do anything else, such as get a judge to be able to change your name. But yeah, I think that basically wraps us up for today. How often are we doing this podcast? Does anyone know?
Once a month.
Once a month. So we'll be trying to record these we'll be trying to record them at the end of the month and be able to release them rather right at the end of the month or the beginning of the next month and everything. So this one's recorded on like end of January, and we'll be trying to release it hopefully by the end of January. I've got like a couple of days before the actual ends to be able to edit it and do all of it, and we'll be posting it on not only Spotify, iTunes, all of the normal hosting providers, but we'll also be posting this on our YouTube channel to be able to mess around. So if you're watching this on YouTube, great. If you're not, if you want to be able to actually watch us sit here and talk, because we do have our cameras on and everything, you can come check us out at youtube.com/@TransPrideSouthampton, and you can come watch us whilst doing everything. We're probably not going to show any visuals or anything. It's just us talking in like a circle area. I don't know what it is. I'll see the visuals when I get to it. But yeah, thank you very much. Yeah.
Sam, where can they find everybody at?
Oh, does everyone want to be able to share their whole social media and everything? If you want to be able to come check us out at TransPride Southampton, you can come check us out on Facebook or Instagram at TransPride Southampton. So if you want to come check us out on them, then obviously come check us out on them. I'll leave it in the show notes anyway. And any other people's socials that they want to be able to share so that you can go check them out, I'll try and leave in the show notes as well. So let's go through. If we go with you, Aoife.
Maybe, but we can chat about that more and see what we think.
Okay, so you'll give me your possible things that you want in the show notes. Okay, that's fine. That'll be in the show notes if Aoife does turn around and say anything. Mabel, where can they find you?
You can find me on Instagram preferably. So my username is Mabel_of_Southampton on Instagram.
So I'll put that in the show notes as well. Orla?
You can find me at Lenny_Auckland on Instagram, or Orla on Instagram. And my YouTube channel is Orla Scory Auckland on YouTube.
If you send that through to me, then I can put it on the show notes. If you want to be able to find me on any of my social medias and all that, it's always at Sam Xavier. I'm on YouTube. I'm on Facebook. Facebook's a little bit different. But at least you can find me on Instagram and YouTube by those names. So if you want to come talk to me, I'm rather on Instagram, or I'm on YouTube if you want to come check me out and everything. So yeah, thank you very much for listening. If you want to come check us out for the next one, don't forget to subscribe, as well as turn around and give us 5 stars if you're on any of those platforms that allow you to be able to do 5 stars, because it actually boosts it a little bit further, and hopefully you can find a new trans person that might enjoy it. Right? All good?
Bye.
Lovely. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.